Netflix just keeps cranking out those true crime documentaries. One of the most recent is the Netflix original Murder to Mercy, the Cyntoia Brown Story. So how does this one stack up against all the other true crime documentaries? Cyntoia Brown was a 16-year-old young woman who was convicted of murder and then sentenced to life. The documentary takes a look at her case, the trial, the laws that were in place then that have now since been changed, and whether or not she should be granted leniency by the government. The story paints Cyntoia as a pretty likable person. She's well-spoken and respectful, and that is in complete contrast with how the prosecution paints her, which is as a cold-blooded killer. One of the things that I found most interesting in this documentary was how they brought in psychologists to evaluate Cyntoia's mental state. Now, she was arrested and convicted as a juvenile, but then sentenced to life in prison. And so they really want to make sure, does she fully understand everything that was happening to her at the time? Was she capable of making the decisions that she made either before she was arrested or after she was arrested and being questioned? All of these come into play. And so the psychologists really then just dive in and ask her a whole bunch of questions and play things out, and I even ask for comprehension, and they read it. What does this mean? What does this mean? And so I like that. I don't think I've ever seen that in a true crime documentary before, where they take that much care to just find out how much did an individual actually know and understand. And then the defense brings that same psychologist into the courtroom for an appeals process. And it was heartbreaking to hear the things that the psychologist was saying about this young woman with her in the courtroom. And you can see the emotional impact and toll that the words being spoken are taking on her. I mean, it really just breaks her down. And I don't really get the sense necessarily that maybe she was as bad off as the psychologist was portraying. But again, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't totally know. But either way, it was still just devastating for her to hear all these things coming at her and being said about her while she's right there. Now, different states have different laws and different ways that they punish people. And the Cyntoia Brown case takes place in Tennessee. And so as convicted as a juvenile, they had two different ways that they could prosecute or to punish. And so it's really interesting to just see that, because I'm not sure how it pans out in other states or even in other countries, what enables you to be charged as an adult or then even convicted as an adult. And so you just get to see that play out for the state of Tennessee in this documentary. Now, one thing that I don't think the documentary was trying to convey, and I don't believe it to be true, is that Cyntoia was blameless, because she's not in this. I mean, she did some bad things. She talks about it. It's not the question of did she do this, but really the motive and why she did it and all of the circumstances that surround that. I think the documentary really is just trying to say that, you know what, this isn't a simple open and shut case. There was a lot more that played into it. And so they felt, hey, you know what, here's a good story to tell, because they have all of these interviews. I mean, it's crazy how much interviews they have. They have just the police footage, but they have interviews with Cyntoia herself as she goes through the questioning phase, being incarcerated. Then you get family member interviews, you get court testimony, you get court video. So it's really cool to just see all of this play out, and that gives us a well-rounded story. And even some of the way that this played out with all of those interviews and just seeing how it's affecting her and just being able to follow her story through time, it reminded me of the other Netflix true crime documentary, The Innocence Files. In this, they're not trying to say that Cyntoia is innocent, so it's not that way. It was just more of the production value, more of the way that it was, the story was told and shown, shot, edited, all of that reminded me of that other documentary. This is a pretty quick watch at about 90 minutes. And it's very interesting and it's intriguing, and I enjoyed watching it, but it's not the best true crime documentary that's available on Netflix. So while I do recommend that you do check it out at some point, this isn't one that you have to knock everybody over as you rush towards the TV to plop down and sit in front of it. There's no sex or nudity, but there is profanity, violent imagery, graphic descriptions of violence, and even sexual violence. What are you watching right now on Netflix? I would love to know. I've got a ton of shows coming up that I'm going to be binging a lot of, and so I may not get any sleep, but I will bring the reviews to you. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.